Hello, my name is Fania Wiodomski. I'm the founder and the CEO of the International Consulting and Transformation Network, LLP UK. Today, I'd like to share with you a story I will call Imposterella, the dirty secret behind the imposter syndrome in women. The term imposter syndrome has become quite popular. It is the feeling that you are in a role you don't deserve or in a position that you shouldn't be in. How did this happen? Let's consider what happens during the journey that takes us from infancy to womanhood. One of the things that occurs is that we are exposed to a lot of stories, bedtime stories, fairy tales, myths that have been around for millennia, and of course Hollywood movies that retell these fairy tales in so many different ways. The dirty secret lives in those stories. Just before bedtime, when we are somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, we enter a state called the hypnagogic state of consciousness, which means our defenses are down. It is a kind of hypnotic state, so when we hear the words, "once upon a time," it is a signal to suspend disbelief. The story that follows enters directly into our subconscious without critical evaluation. The younger we are, the less capable we are of critical evaluation. Hearing "once upon a time" over and over again makes it a hypnotic trigger. But more important than that is the content of the story, because that is how the message is delivered. That is where the dirty secret lives. The story begins with a very beautiful young girl, beauty and youth being the prize. Then a prince or a king or a knight wants to possess that beauty and youth. And after some complications and setbacks, he eventually wins the prize. They get married. And the story ends with the celebration of the marriage and the phrase, "they lived happily ever after." What does that really mean? If we do a detailed content analysis, as I have done, of fairy tales like Snow White, Cinderella, Goldilocks, and many others, you will see that the little girl has no voice. Very, very few times do we hear her say anything. It is usually the adult admonishing her or giving her prescriptive rules to follow. However, if she breaks the rules, as Goldilocks or Red Riding Hood did, they are punished by exposure to great fear and mortal danger. When Snow White broke the rules by opening the door to a stranger, she got the poisoned apple from her evil stepmother, who was really a witch. What saved her from the poison was the good prince's magical kiss. The role of young girls in fairy tales, myths, movies is to be beautiful, obedient, and silent. Their contribution is to offer pleasure, to procreate, and serve. So why would a young woman not feel like an imposter when she steps up to take responsibility or to play a leadership role or to demonstrate her competence and show that she's capable of doing far more than remaining silent, obedient, and beautiful? What is the dirty secret behind the imposter syndrome? What happens after "and they lived happily ever after"? After is when the young girl goes from the age of innocence to the age of discovery. At this stage of her life, she wears 101 hats. She is a lover, a mother, the general manager of whatever home she is responsible for, a supply chain manager, a child psychologist, a nurse, a negotiator, a hotel manager, a caterer, a chief, and a chef, and a driver, and often an external job holder on top of all that. She is responsible for the management of her home and her family, and for making sure that every detail of day-to-day life is covered. And yes, there is no glamour in this role. But daily learning and growth become survival skills. The working hours? The working hours are 24/7. We hear very little about the competence of a woman who has successfully worn the 101 hats. She remains invisible, unrecognized, and underappreciated. We only know about the part where she had to look beautiful enough to attract someone to protect her because she was supposed to be incapable of taking care of herself. The part of a woman's life when she begins to discover her true identity, her capacity for dealing with the good and the bad, and her multiple strengths, is not covered in most stories. This part starts coming together after the age of 40 or so, when she comes into her own. If she has children, they may now be old enough for her to get back into her career and take charge. This is when she really finds that she needs her self-confidence. She needs to transform her uncertainty and her lack of confidence in who she is and what she represents into a clear identity, a purpose, and self-belief. The question is, do we ever see that transformation as something good? Does the older woman become the wise sage, or does she become the old hag? How does literature portray her? How do stories portray her? They portray her as evil and as an ugly witch. Women with power are seen as evil. Just take another look at the fairy tales, myths, religions, and movies, and you will see stories abounding with women using their knowledge and their power for evil. On the other hand, stories of older men show them as the wise old sage filled with wisdom. How often do we have the wisdom of an older woman in any story or movie? In some cultures, the older women are portrayed as oracles or seers who can tell the future. But in those roles, the woman is transmitting the message from some higher power. It is not her. She is merely a channel for, rather than an initiator of the power. Of course, we feel like imposters when we step up and play the role of the leader, someone who is wise, knowledgeable, resilient, capable, and kind. Yes, kind. The power of self-confidence has been hidden from us, and the dirty secret is that this has been happening from the very earliest stages of our lives. We have been told over and over again that our role is to look pretty, be obedient, and remain silent, or else fear and mortal danger await us. Do not listen to those fairy tales because they are just that. They're fairy tales. Instead, do these three things. First, audit and delete beliefs that are inconsistent with your role as a woman who has successfully worn 101 hats. You are the hero of that life. 2, watch what you feed into the minds of those within your circle of influence, regardless of gender. Remember, competence is genderless. And 3, remind yourself that you are living in the after, where you get to design and decide the role you deserve. You are not an imposter. You are the hero of that story. Claim it. Enjoy it. Remember that Imposterella belongs to the distant, distant past. And debunk that dirty secret. Let everyone know that it is an outrageous lie. And there is you. Live yourself. Be yourself.